Welcome to Washington, D.C., a city bursting with tourists, young professionals, and politicians. D.C. is a city that invites change and welcomes new thought because here, you might actually be able to put your ideas into action. But is change good if those making it are immoral? How do we stay true to our morals when ambition and other outside pressures get in the way? And more importantly, is today's youth, the changemakers of tomorrow, moral?
I think I'm a moral person. I think the way that I go about making decisions is based off of how I feel I believe in things, and if there's things I don't feel like I believe in, I don't really want to be complicit in being around it.
A moral person? Yeah.
I try to be, at the very least. I would say so.
I think largely yes. I think in today's age, I think everyone has their own different morals and ethics in a sense, so sometimes you're not up to everyone's standards, but I think generally, personally, yes, I think so. I'm a moral person.
I can be, well, pretty much, yeah. I can be rude sometimes, but overall, pretty much.
But what is morality? The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy has two definitions. Descriptively, morality can refer to certain codes of conduct put forward by society or a group, such as a religion, or accepted by an individual for her own behavior. Normatively, morality can refer to a code of conduct that, given under specific conditions, would be put forward by all rational persons. A survey of 50 people under the age of 25 revealed that 84% saw themselves as a moral person, 54% thought that today's youth is moral, and 40% thought older generations were moral. So how does today's youth define morality?
I guess morality to me just means, in general, just doing the right thing and putting your own beliefs aside here and there to do what will have the best impact on partially yourself, but also just everyone around you, and not doing things for your own self-interest where they can harm other people.
I feel like if you just follow certain concepts and just overall are just a nice person and don't do things to harm anybody or make their life more difficult than it probably already is.
I think morality means sort of being true to yourself, but also doing what's best, either for yourself or somebody else in the world. That's sort of the standard I hold myself to. So,
to help other people and to uphold the law.
I'm moral because I'm nice, I'm caring, I worry about others more than I worry about myself.
So morality means, as an evangelical Christian, a Bible-believing Christian, it means that following the Bible and following the right statutes that God has put in place for us, and to follow the example of Jesus Christ.
Morality is how people guide themselves in situations where these ideas of right and wrong aren't always as clear-cut as it is. And I think it's basically kind of finding that inner, subconscious and figuring out what you need to do in that situation and in that circumstances.
Gunshots ring out in this South Florida high school. Terrified students hiding in classrooms during the gunman's rampage.
Students using the hashtag Sanctuary Campus as their battle cry while demanding their universities become a place of safety for minorities and illegals.
Harvey Weinstein! Let's celebrate Michael Riedel! Harvey Weinstein coming out in handcuffs going into a black Sequoia.
Several bananas were found hung up in the style of nooses, dangling in 3 separate locations on the Washington, D.C. campus.
Massive crowd of women marching behind me. This is the front line, and they're pretty amped.
Donald Trump has got to go! Hey, hey!
In light of the several incidents that have captured the national conversation over the past 2 years or so, morality has been at the heart of these discussions. As the lines between what's moral and immoral become increasingly blurred, and we question things like immigration, sexual assault, and racism, we have to look at our own moral compass as well.
I think as I've grown and matured, it's changed from just what I was raised to include that, but also it's grown more complex as I've learned my own. I've been able to discover topics on my own and add to those morals.
I've definitely learned more about the world, which then changed my version of what I thought was right versus wrong. I like to think I've become a better person as I grew.
I think one thing that I've noticed is like kind of just seen as being a radical concept when it shouldn't be is like the concept of empathy and sympathy. Like those aren't things that we should be taking for granted. We should be extending our empathy and we should be extending our sympathy to other people, even if their situations are different than ours. Even if we don't totally understand their situations, we should still like lend an ear or a hand in those kind of situations.
Getting older and realizing things aren't a fairy tale, like as your parents would make it when you're a kid, as in you learning it for yourself when you're growing up.
I think it's just your common sense. You just think about how your actions impact others, and if you're doing something that's going to hurt somebody else or harm somebody else, it's probably not moral. It probably ain't right.
Have you done anything that's hurt somebody else?
Absolutely, we all have.
And how have you dealt with that? How do you feel after it?
You learn from it, you apologize, and you move on, and you try to not make the same mistakes twice.
I think personally, no, I think it's become a little more solidified since I've come to college. I think globally, I feel like it's done a little bit of it's pulled back a little bit, but I think personally, I think my morals have sort of solidified a little bit. I know more where I stand, and you know, if I need to take a stand on this particular issue or a topic, then I feel comfortable doing so.
I'd say
For some, growing up meant realizing the values they were brought up on didn't align with their moral code.
the more I've learned about, there's a lot of rhetoric that you get fed as a kid, either through media or through the people around you, that I've later found to be incorrect. Certain things that they say, they tend Sorry. I'm not sure how to explain it.
Some people used religion as a guide.
I think I've become more focused and learning more logically how the rules that God set up in the Bible actually make sense, logically and reasonably. And so the idea that the Ten Commandments say don't kill, don't lie, don't murder, and the idea that those are still very true and very applicable. Like, I don't think you would go up to anybody on the street and say, hey, do you think lying is a good thing? And they would say yes. But the idea that each of those rules makes logical sense, and the older I get and the more studying I do as a grad student shows that it's more logical.
I think like religions play a really big role in how I see my responsibilities as an adult and how I see my responsibility to others as well. As a Muslim, I'm taught to be kind to my parents, be kind to my family, be kind to my neighbors, be kind to my friends, and to also just extend peace and like hospitality to everyone. So that's something I strive to be.
Grandparents, both sides, were religious in a sense, you could say, but they never really went to church, they never did anything like that. So that diluted passion for religion transferred onto my parents, and then that's whatever small passion for religion passed on to me, and religion really hasn't had that much effect on my life. I've definitely been around a lot of Christian religions in my life, like Western religions, but maybe I've been to church once in my life. Yeah, once. So not a lot. I think it's more so the morals, just basically like the golden rules in a sense, just like standard good rules about being a human being. I think probably some basic tenets of like Christianity about like being a good person have sort of, in like a secular sense, have sort of impacted me, but I don't hold myself to like a religious standard like this says this in the Bible. Like I've never found myself doing that.
I think everyone deals with religion differently. I think that some people base their actions off their religion, and that sometimes can be used for good. Some people do things because they think, like, they believe that God is like an all-loving God that wants you to treat others with respect, and people treat others with respect for that reason. I think that that's noble of them. I think people use religion for horrible reasons as well. I think people use the name of God for bad things, for hate, and for things that are bad. So I don't think religion is necessarily moral or immoral. I think it depends on how the people interpret it and how they use it for good or bad. I think we've seen religion be used for horrible things like 9/11 and the Crusades, and I mean, even the Holocaust. I mean, it was a persecution of an entire religion. I mean, look at the whole gay marriage thing. I mean, people were like, "Oh, well, God says in the Bible." Like, okay, well, there's a lot of other things in the Bible that, you know, are pretty messed up because it was written so long ago. I personally am somewhat religious. I think that I wanted to do the right thing and treat people with respect and treat everyone the way they deserve to be treated. Like, you should love everyone, and not love everyone, but respect everyone. We're all people, and that's how I kind of base my morality, but other people don't always. Some people use it for the wrong reasons, I think. And I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think it's the religion's fault. I think it's people's fault, people's interpretation of it.
Honestly, like, the way I see it is that whatever people decide to do with their belief of God or a lack of belief of God is entirely up to them. And so I don't have any right in being in that space because that's not my space to begin with.
Well, I just know from our perspective, from the church's perspective, it doesn't seem like as many people are going to church in general. I know attendance in our church, in our Catholic church, is down, at least where I'm from, which is from Pittsburgh. Does that mean that our kids are less moral? I don't know. If hopefully they're getting it at home, because I don't think they're getting it from institutions like I got it from, you know, as much. So.
I'm Jewish, and you know, we're not a religious family, but we're a family that's committed to our religion. And I believe that all religions, all mainstream religions, do have a level of values attached to them. And I do think that's part of the if we want to say degradation of our society today, is I think less people are religious, or at least feel that connection to their religion. And again, as long as the religion is not teaching to hate, if you're teaching to most mainstream religions teach to care and feel good about, you know, other people and accepting of other people, and I think that's important. So I think, and I've told my children, both of them, that, you know, the best class they both took was comparative religions. I said the more you understand other people's religions, the more you respect them, and the more you actually probably respect your own also.
Over the past few years, religion has been on the decline, especially among the younger generation. The Public Religion Research Institute says that less than half of the American public identify as white Christian. And an article from Quartz says that 25% of college students as of 2015 did not identify with a religion, as compared to 13% in 1970. Some researchers believe this decline is linked to the rise of social media. People no longer need a religious community when they have an easily accessible online one.
I think it's a new generation. I think with every new generation, the older generation looks back a little bit, and I feel like that's sort of said, but I also feel like it's going to be a little unforeseen how technology factors into this a little bit. Technology's completely changed, I think, the way that we interact with each other, and I think with it moving so fast and always changing and new different ways to communicate and talk and converse and trade ideas and things, that it's morals, the way that they've usually been in the past, have changed a lot, and just the way we should look at them, I think, might be a little different. I don't know how we would look at them different, but I think just because of technology and the impact it's given us, I think we have to reevaluate how we look at morals and ethics. It's not the same way as it was in the past.
I've definitely noticed that there's some places on social media where things get a little more materialistic. Sometimes on Instagram, There's so many people that have like sponsorships, and it's really hard for like younger people and even like younger people to differentiate like what is an ad, what is an actual post, what is someone being real. And like sometimes that affects how we like see ourselves and be like, oh well, why don't I have like this much money to buy these clothes, or why can't I look like that? And so I think there's like one bad side of it, but I think another side is that it's also like a very curated way of how aesthetics and looks should be like. So there's people who are kind of like contributing to what this certain aesthetic should look like, or what this certain kind of vibe should be. So I think that's one thing that's pretty powerful, is that there's autonomy, but at the same time, like, you know, like how much autonomy is too much autonomy, I guess.
Social media, the whole point of Instagram is to show your life off. It's the whole point is to social media is to prove to others that you have a cool life, and that's okay to a certain extent, as long as you don't get obsessed with it. I don't know, I mean, I think our generation has different sets of morals. I think that we are different, obviously, than other generations, and I think that it's just we're different. We look at things differently. We're judgmental based on like other people's social media and things like that, and we like to judge. But I mean, other generations before us judged too. It's not like we're more judgmental. It's just the way we have access to more material to judge. But I mean, when I was in elementary school, I mean, people were just as judgmental when there was no social media. I mean, there was this girl that literally, there was a club called this girl. Her name, I don't remember what her name was, but say her name is Jessica. There was a club called the Jessica We Hate Jessica Club, and there was like 10 girls that met and just judged her all the time. Like, there's nothing with social media. Just people just are judgmental. It's like we're naturally judgmental, and I think that it makes it easier with social media. But I don't think it's just us as people. I don't think social media has changed us. I think it's just we've adapted to social media.
I think it could be a place to invite moral discussion if used properly, but I do think it's often more closed-minded and aggressive, and that it does kind of keep the generation from seeing the evidence behind certain issues so that people can form their own opinions.
You know, if you never have to interact with that person that you might be putting down like in an immensely offensive way, you know, I think that gives you more leeway, because if you can sort of do whatever you want and not really have any repercussions for that, besides maybe you get blocked from posting for 24 hours, you know, nothing's really stopping you from doing that. But if, you know, I said something offensive to somebody in person, you know, you would get that immediate like feedback, and you might not do that again, or you might even like change that a little bit. But with it being online anymore, and you can talk to anyone anywhere around the world, just the consequences for saying something like that aren't really, they don't seem to have like an immediate effect to like really change you, really. So I think it's going to still take some time to change the way that we, you know, maybe discipline or like give feedback on, you know, conversations that occur online.
Because the kids are getting just blasted from so many different angles. You know, with the cell phones and the media and just, you know, it's definitely more challenging. It's challenging as a parent, because you just constantly have to remind your child, this is who you are, this is where you've come from, this is what we expect. You know, this is what we, you know, how we expect you to act. It's hard because you know, I say that to him, and then he goes out into the world, and you know, it's not just peer pressure. You know, the peer pressure. It's the social media. It's just everything. You know, it's a battle.
I'm sure there are just some people on their accounts, they like to post certain, like their political beliefs, or when they participate in a certain protest, and then it just becomes a place where people are ranting instead of really truly using different information to support their arguments, and then people just kind of agree and feed off of each other from that.
Social media hasn't stopped immoral people. I mean, look at our president. He's as moral as a moral gets, and if anything, the media has helped. The media, not if anything, the media straight up has helped, and he would not become president if there was no social media, if there was no coverage like there was in the 50s. If he ran in the 50s, he would not win.
In fact, some people have said I have the greatest political instinct in 50 years. I don't think so.
The 2016 election and Trump presidency has had an undeniable effect on the nation's political climate and what values the youth consider to be moral. The moral standard set by the leader of the free world trickles down to what is expected of our everyday leaders. But in this era, that benchmark is questioned.
His actions are all him, and he constantly brings other people down, and it's really embarrassing. The things that he does is just not right, and I think a lot of people have seen his actions and thought that, since he does it, it's okay, and they can do the same things. And it's kind of ironic, of course, because like when something like Samantha Bee says something that's, like I said, immoral of her to say, he automatically is quick to point that out and say how horrible it is, but it's not. He's above the law and above his own behavior to continue to do the same things. I mean, it's immoral to brag about sexually assaulting women. It's immoral to mock disabled reporters. It's immoral to put other people down and consistently say awful things. And it's immoral to cheat on your wife and to have affairs and have 3 different wives. And everything the man does is just really flat out disgusting. And he's a bad example for this country because people look up to him. He's the damn president, and the word president doesn't really mean a damn thing anymore, of course, because he's kind of just ruined the respect of the office for a lot of people. But yeah, dude sucks. There's no morality, and it's sad because people look up to him, and they don't have many morals as well. But I mean, some do, some don't. It's kind of a tough line.
I get upset because I feel like they just aren't a good person, so she shouldn't have the role to be not in charge of people, but construct people on what to do in life if they can't do it themselves to be nice.
I think looking at both sides is important. As much as I dislike Fox News, I still have to see what they're saying in order to know what's going on. For example, as a literature student, I read popular fiction even though it's not necessarily my forte or what I would like to read, so that I can join the conversation. And so knowing what Trump is doing, as much as I disagree with it and as much as it may frustrate me at times, especially with the Me Too movement going on and saying that it is not the victim's fault. And a huge part of what the church needs to do is to say, no, you were wronged, it's not your fault, and knowing that there is restoration, and there is restoration in Christ of morality, and that we are never going to be able to be perfect, but admitting those faults and admitting those imperfections is a huge step to being moral. And because you can't be moral if you think that everything is moral.
I think that the last 2.5 years is only escalated, but I think it's really unfair to just put it on the last 2.5 years. We had a president several presidents ago who talked about sex not really being sex, and then we've had presidents beyond that who've made some other very poor moral decisions. We have a lot of people in our I think the leadership has continued in this country to not be as moral, but I also think that where it's being emphasized more and more in the press, both ways, about trying to live. I think everybody's trying to preach to everybody else how they should live their lifestyle instead of just accepting people for who they are.
It's sad. I mean, what I've seen in Washington, it's like this behavior that I feel is unacceptable has now become the new norm, where I just feel like this unacceptable behavior, things that are said, and outrageous things that are being said, and on both sides of the aisle. It's not just, Democratic, Republican, on both sides. It's just, we've got to come back to some civility and understand that we're all in this together and that we need to compromise. But I feel like our country, especially the government, and it starts at the top, unfortunately, is not going in the right direction with the morals. I mean, like I said, things are being said in the paper are just outrageous.
I think in my upbringing, I think the one thing that was always stressed to me is always, no matter how many times you fail, keep trying because you're still learning from that. And I think in terms of morals, that's important because you're always evolving every day and changing. So I think just always being able to sort of go with the flow in a sense, but still be true to yourself.
I think Yeah, definitely how you're like socialized among your family is important. If you have like a lack of like role models within your family, that's hard for you to understand like what exactly is your moral ground, like who becomes your role model then when there isn't anyone in your family to do that. At the same time, your family, like, it's so weird because I feel like there's like times where like your family is supposed to always be the role model, and then sometimes it's hard when like you see your family as not always being capable of being the role models that they want you to see. The like pretense is that you are moral, but sometimes like people aren't always moral. Like sometimes your heroes mess up, and so there's kind of this thing where you should definitely try to look past your heroes and like I guess grow up over your heroes. Sometimes when your heroes like mess up and you feel like a little disappointed that you expected something better from them, but then that never happens. Like I think that's also important reality to distinguish against.
My faith is very important to me, so I sent my child to a Catholic grade school, and he's now in a Catholic high school. So he's had just as many religion classes in his life as he has math and science classes. So, plus I hope we back up what he's learning in school with what he's seeing at home.
I remember going through checking out a supermarket, and I just got $1 more back when they were changed. And in front of my child, I handed that back, and I said, "We don't need that $1. She'll get in trouble for not having the cash register right." So I think that you try to set those examples. There's you have your own feeling about homeless in the street or anything else, and so I've always taught my children we're not big on giving money, but if we have a doggy bag from a restaurant, we always try to give it to somebody in the street because then I know they're getting food or water or whatever else they need. So I've tried to do that by example. I also have always been involved in volunteering within the community on different boards within my community and trying to make a difference.
We need in our leaders good role models. I hope that this generation can see beyond that nonsense and say, this isn't acceptable.
I think people try to use like partying and drinking as a way to say that like the teens have no moral compass, which I think is untrue. I think our generation is at a point where we can choose to be like the moral ground.
Now we're young, and as long as you still respect people.
Being kind to other people, making sure people are safe.
Openly accept them, know that it's not my place to judge them.
Every generation is always looks down a little bit on the next one and says, "Oh, you're not up to our standards." But times change. With that comes completely different morals and ethics. What has sort of shocked me about our generation is no matter how many punches that are handed to us, we find some way to bounce back.
In Washington, D.C., for the Armstrong Williams Show, I'm Sonica Loganathan.